another time. But
all right, so hybrids.
Hybrids, the ones I knew.
Okay.
Well, they showed me how they took like the human egg.
Mm-hmm.
They take whatever the characteristics they want from the DNA. They use the bacteria to help multiply that, or I guess to make it, the cell division happen faster so that they could, I can't remember exactly how it worked. I should have written it down years ago, but I mean, it matched up to what people say is how cloning is done, even down to the bacteria. So what they would do is they already had in mind what they wanted these hybrids to look like.
Okay.
I've heard that there's all various types of hybrids that many of them look human, and like I've said about myself, I don't know that I don't have some DNA in me that isn't completely human. I don't know. I was, of course, brought up to believe that I wasn't completely human to start with, that it's already been in the family line for generations. But the hybrids that I saw on the ships all looked pretty much the same. They could, some of them possibly could pass as being humans, just odd, like maybe just odd-looking humans.
Wow.
The oldest ones I saw were, I guess they were age of puberty, or at least they appeared to be that old. I don't know what happened to them after that. They were that age, whether they didn't live any longer, if they disposed of them, but they kept them from all different degrees of creation, from like the two-celled on up to the adolescent age. They had boys and girls. Most of them had they were kind of bald-headed, but they had hair that started around the back of their head, kind of long and stringy, thin hair. They had the skin of a human, but they looked like more like the build of an alien gray.
Mm-hmm.
And just lanky looking, all thin and lanky looking. They had more human-looking faces, but they did have a little bit of gray-looking features, not the oval-shaped eyes. So if you could see, if you saw some of these kids somewhere in let's say a school somewhere, a special school, you would think, well, just something happened to them when they were in their womb. Something's wrong with them, but they're human. They looked enough human to pass, put it that way. Well, they used these children to do some of the cloning themselves. They used the children to run the nursery. The children that I knew on the ship were completely happy with what they were doing. It's like they didn't care to be a part of the rest of the world. Even if they knew the rest of the world, they might be able to fit in. But the point was they seemed to be very happy with what they're doing. They did have the collective consciousness of the gray, but they also had emotions and could smile, and you could see a warmth in their eyes when they would smile. It was like human. So it's like they had both. And like the babies that, like I was mentioned, I think on another show, that there were babies that they told me were mine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's 3 of them at one point. There's several times they told me, hey, these are yours. And it's kind of horrifying, but when I looked in their eyes, it's like they knew me.
Oh my gosh.
They knew I was their mom, and there was an intelligence there. And it's like I had compassion for them, and I was afraid at the same time, all kinds of different emotions. And
now, I want to ask you a question here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've read about certain events happening more often now than in the past, where women will feel pregnant. They may even test positive for pregnancy, and then one day they wake up and it's just gone. Yeah. There's no pregnancy. There's no fetus. There's nothing. It's like they were never pregnant at all. Do you think that there is any chance that the two ideas or concepts are related?
Definitely.
Oh my gosh.
I think that happened to me. I think that happened to me a few times.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and when I've looked back, I kind of suspected it then, but wasn't sure. But this there's the three that this would have happened not in my womb.
Okay.
But they did want them to have they wanted me, it was like they wanted them to have nurturing from me.
Uh-huh.
They wanted that connection. They wanted to see the interaction. There's several things they wanted. They wanted to see the interaction between the babies and me with the babies. And also the nurturing was important, a certain amount of nurturing from the very start. And they were taking me on a regular basis to be with these kids, with these babies. And I know it's weird again. I mean, this whole thing just sounds so insane, but I might as well say it because it's,
okay.
It goes along with it.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of sickening in a way to mention it. But I was lactating. For many years I lactated, and the doctors had no idea why.
Huh.
Well, I... is that true? It's pretty far out about that, but it kind of goes together with it, I guess.
And the thing is, what I think, right? It can't be just you. Somebody else out there is going to hear this, and the light is going to dawn, I believe, and they will begin to realize that certain things may be true about them as well. Now, here's the thing. I want to ask you, because you haven't just seen like some of these human gray hybrids. There's other hybrids that you have seen on board these ships. Why don't you go into that a little bit, and then
there's one.
We'll see where this goes. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a hybrid or not.
Okay.
And if anything was sadistic, I don't know if this appeared possibly to be sadistic. I'm not sure if it was.
Okay.
And I'll say this because it might mean something to somebody. Well, this was a large ship, quite large, and I was with the little gray as usual. He took me on this one level to show me something. And in the far side of the room, there was this creature that was probably about, I don't know, maybe 5 feet tall. It had a fox face. It was like a human in a sense, like it had the arms and the legs, but it had the face of a fox and fur. But its eyes it had the human-looking eyes, and it was intelligent. And it had clothes on, except that they had its chest cavity open up.
Oh my gosh.
There was nothing in it. This thing was alive, and it was horrified. The point that it was kind of in shock. It was looking at me like, "Can you help me?" It was horrified. What can you do to help me do something? And I'm looking at this little gray, and I'm thinking, and the gray's making a point like, "There's nothing. I mean, you're done." And I'm thinking the same thing. There's nothing I can do for you. See, they were keeping this thing alive. They had dissected it. I don't know if it felt pain or not, but they had dissected it while it was awake and alive. It knew exactly what was going on, and they were keeping it alive. For what reason? I don't know, but they just did. Well, this little gray wanted me to see that.
Oh my gosh.
And so I read years later, I was running through some kind of, this just stuff happens to me by accident where I'll just be researching something and then I see a fact that somebody claims this and that happened years ago. Well, I've looked for it since and I can't find it. It had to do with people reporting fox people. I mean, like centuries ago. People that had fox faces, and they think it had something to do with extraterrestrials. So maybe somebody out there, this will make sense to them. That's the only reason I bring it up. And very, very real experience.
And the thing is, okay, so we find skulls in South America with elongated brain cavities on display in Peru. You can look it up. Where did those come from? I once saw a picture, and I don't know if it was doctored or not, but this particular picture had a skull with horns coming out of the forehead, literal horns, but it was like a human-like skull. And I don't know if it was real or not, but if it was, well, what kind of creature has that? When you look at ancient cultures, right, you see, especially, for instance, in Greek mythology, as they call mythology, obviously you see true chimeras. There are mixtures of beings, and this is like being reported and passed down and say, well, it happened before. I was reading a testimony by a guy named Emmanuel Eni, and anyone that's listening to this program can look him up online. He was a witch doctor in Africa, always interesting stories coming out of there. And, you know, one of the things that he said was, well, he did some incantations with his witchcraft to go into meet the space people. But also, during part of his initiations, he had to spend some time in, like, a cave. And in this cave, there were these, and I believe he described them as faceless, human torso-like creatures with snake tails, or what you would call a naga, really, in mythology. And he said, well, he was tortured by these guys for, I think it was a week straight. Anyway, don't take my word for it. Read his story on your own. You can just look it up, Emmanuel Eni. Just type it in. And, I'm just thinking, like, well, Carolyn, you're not the first person to say these kinds of things exist. It's honestly seems like throughout history, if you look at the weight of what has been said, there's way more evidence for some of these stranger things to be accepted as, well, the truth, than to just say, well, it's just people, and people like to make up stories.
People better be prepared for some of these stories.
The question is, when all of this begins to hit the fan, then what does that mean? And I know, like, a long time ago, one of the things that God told me personally, which opened me up to this whole thing as a Christian, especially understanding, what people would call the alien agenda and so forth, is he said you can't possibly understand what's coming to the earth and in the last days until you get it in context of some of these other things, including the alien agenda. And that, for me, kind of sealed the deal. I said, okay, well, I can now open myself up to understand some of these things and just take it at face value until I can fully explain it, which, we're not trying to fully explain anything here. We're just saying, well, this is what you experienced. And, take it or leave it, listeners. But I believe that this information, personally, is very relevant, and it's going to hold grave implications as we move forward in time.